Nashwa's haircut. I hated that hair.
Oh my God, we're tiny.
The same, we all look really different. That was a horrible haircut.
It was, the 80s, and we had embarrassing clothes, really bad hair. I thought we were really cool back then.
Those years in Kuwait before the war were just amazing, carefree.
Before the invasion, the world was a fairy tale to me.
When you're young, you think that you've got a lot of time ahead of you, and your friends will always be there.
It may have been one of the world's smallest states, but in the late 1980s, Kuwait was booming. The Gulf Emirate had a stable government, a developed infrastructure, a vast reserve of minerals, and an enviable GDP. And with the comfortable lifestyle and protective environment, for me, it was the perfect place to grow up. Birthday parties marked the passing years, and the school bell divided our days. Until the summer of 1990, when one day brought an end to our way of life and an end of innocence.
It was the 2nd of August. I remember hearing a lot of planes. My mother was on the phone. I heard her saying, "Oh, they're here. What's happening?"
The living room was filled with family members, my parents' family. And I was like, what's going on? And they said Kuwait was gone. I'm like, how can a country be gone?
I could hear helicopters, and my dad was staring out at the helicopters, and I asked him, what's going on? What are all these helicopters doing here? And he said, Iraq has invaded Kuwait, and the Kuwaiti emir has been deposed.
When we were that young, you don't really understand the concept of invasion and war. I mean, war, you understand it, two sides fighting each other and, in some sort of, battle.
And the invasion would lead to a war hailed as the mother of all battles by Saddam Hussein. The Iraqi president had accused Kuwait of profiting from a disputed oil field, of flooding the market and damaging Iraq's economy. Kuwait's small army was no match for Saddam's battle-hardened veterans. Within hours, Iraqi forces took control of the wealthy Gulf state, claimed by Saddam as Iraq's 19th province.
Should be going any second.
At just 10 years old, we found ourselves at the center of an event much bigger than us, that scattered our class and propelled our lives into unimagined directions. In the aftermath of the invasion, my family settled in England. For 20 years, I've wondered what happened to my friends after we'd been separated, about who had survived and how. I never imagined we'd find each other again. It took the growth of social networking to reunite us.
Hi, is that Nada? Is this Ali? Hi, is that Sarah? It's nice to hear your voice.
How unexpected to hear from you, but really good.
Well, I've only just started speaking to people. I don't know if you remember Ali and Fahad.
I do. It's crazy because as soon as the pictures went on Facebook, I could pretty much name nearly everyone, I think.
Wow.
It's the sort of thing you just don't forget for some reason.
So do you think people are going to turn up to this reunion?
Yeah, I should be able to come. Would the reunion be in Kuwait?
Yeah, in Kuwait.
Let me check with Fahad because I know he traveled. There's 2 periods during the year.
I'll definitely be around. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Normally I do travel in May, but not this year. So
Well, good.
the timing is great.
But that would be so amazing.
Yeah, no, I think
That
that'd be
would be
incredible.
so weird. I can't believe it's 20 years. I mean, I feel so old.
The reunion I'd planned for months was becoming a reality. After all this time, I was going back to Kuwait to meet some of the friends I left behind, and to see the impact the war had on the country I had only known as a child. I could still remember how the Kuwait towers used to dominate the skyline. Today they're dwarfed by high-rise buildings that have grown up across the capital, obscuring the city I knew. I expected to see signs of an invasion that was still fresh in my mind, but no physical evidence stood out. In fact, it was hard to imagine that this sleepy summer city had ever seen a full-scale war. But when I looked closer, the reminders were there. Even at my old school, the familiar red brick wall now proudly displays the flags of the countries that liberated Kuwait. I'd seen photos that showed how the Iraqi soldiers had occupied our school, turning it into an army barracks. The building has since been repaired, but some damage can take longer to heal.
Coming back to the school, everything seems so much smaller than I remember it. The school was enormous, but now it just all seems like I could walk it around the whole thing in a few steps.
I went to meet Mrs. Rajab, the British woman who founded the New English School with her Kuwaiti husband in 1969. She was a familiar face at every school event, and as I found out, she hadn't let the invasion drive her away.
Don't you? When you came back to the school after liberation, what did you find here, around in the gym and elsewhere?
A total mess, but there were chicken feathers that the Iraqis had made into soup or whatever for themselves. Everything was a total, utter shambles. Shells and ammunition everywhere.
I remember this room. What were your feelings when you actually came back and saw that everything you built up was destroyed in a few months?
I don't think it would be repeatable what I thought at the time. I was so annoyed about it that, if nothing else, kept me going. And I would get that, along with the people who helped, we would get that place in order. And in a sense, that was a good thing we did think that. Be no use sitting down and doing nothing and moaning. I personally think that everybody in Kuwait couldn't believe what the Iraqis were going to do.
Iraq's invasion also shocked the rest of the world. No one expected the dispute between the neighboring Arab countries would lead to an attack. But at 2 in the morning on the 2nd of August 1990, Iraq's army crossed into Kuwait along this highway, known locally as the Abdali Road. A turnoff leads to one of the cemeteries containing the graves of some of the Kuwaitis killed during the war. More than 1,000 are believed to have died. One of my closest friends at school was a Kuwaiti national called Noof. It was a relief when I finally found her.
I don't know I'll see you again. Thank you.
Do you remember that last term of school? Do you remember the last day at all?
I remember everyone got snacks and we were snacking all day long. Said our goodbyes and thought we'd see each other in a couple of months. Took 20 years, I guess. Nashwa, you asked me if I have any memories from before the invasion, pictures, footage. Actually, my life was erased. Everything was stolen, everything was taken. So that's why maybe I was so surprised and excited after I saw the pictures you had posted on Facebook. Really nothing is left. It's like we had to start over. But we were shocked. We woke up and Kuwait was gone. I mean, I used to wake up to the news, sleep on the news, and that was our life, basically, just waiting.
Do you remember these?
Noof and I had been students at an international school. Most of our other classmates were now living in different parts of the world. Finding them had been a challenge, as the school records were destroyed during the occupation. Meeting them was now proving just as difficult. Many were not able to travel to Kuwait at the time arranged, but those who did decide to come seemed drawn by powerful memories that I was eager to uncover. Rocky, an Indian national born in Kuwait, was returning to the country of his birth for the first time in 20 years.
How do you feel going back to your old home?
I'm excited about going back and seeing the places that I've got a very vivid memory of, but I'm also at the same time a bit anxious that it may have completely changed. I would have thought the roads would be finished by now, but you just straight all the way, and then the entrance should be on the right. A little oasis here. I don't remember any greenery on this bit. I remember it just being open sand and very, very flat. This is where it was on the morning that we found out that the invasion had occurred.
Hello. Hi. So nice to see you. I can't believe it.
I know, I really can't believe it.
It's surreal. I remember at dawn my parents tried to wake me up to find out what channel Iraqi TV was on. I was our family's TV expert. So I told them it was on Channel 4, and then I went back to sleep.
I woke up early in the morning to take my dog for a walk, actually, and coming home and then putting the television on, and then seeing on the news that Iraq had invaded Kuwait.
We are joined now live on the telephone by a radio journalist, Hedy Lebberding, who is a journalist from the Netherlands based in Kuwait. We understand, Ms. Lebberding, you have just been out on the streets there. How does the situation seem to you at this hour?
It's impossible at this moment to get out on the streets because there's been a curfew announced by the provisional government.
I went to call my mum, and she watched it as well, and we were both just absolutely in disbelief. And then I think I probably tried to call some friends and realised that all the telephones were, all communications were dead. Within a matter of maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, we saw tanks rolling down the motorway that was that you see from our sitting room window.
I woke up at around 7 and I could hear helicopters, and my dad was staring out at the helicopters, and I asked him, what's going on? What are all these helicopters doing here? And he said Iraq has invaded Kuwait and the Kuwaiti emir has been deposed, and that Iraq had taken over, that Iraq was controlling the country now. It still took a bit of time to sink in. I asked him, so does that mean that we won't be going to the beach tonight? I still thought that, maybe life would continue as normal.
The road was too far away to see soldiers in particular, but I remember seeing what looked like lots of little dots across the desert, and I think we got to know that they were little tents.
The gravity of the situation began to strike me. Nobody was using the word war at the time, but it had a lot of, it reminded me of what I'd heard about war, is that, it restricts your freedom of movement, you have to be careful, things might get dangerous.
نداء لكل رؤساء الدول العربية والأعضاء في الجامعة. نداء من الكويت للتدخل السريع، فالاتصالات مقطوعة بيننا وبين العالم كله.
Lots of people from our complex were driving out to Saudi Arabia, so they were just sort of getting in the cars and fleeing. And at the time, we decided to stay put there just to see how the situation was going to develop.
But attention is focused on Kuwait City itself. There are Iraqi troops around 8 embassies there now, including those of Britain and America. At the British Embassy, the remaining staff reported the electricity was cut off this afternoon.
My father was the Bangladeshi ambassador to Kuwait at the time, and he didn't want to leave Kuwait until all the Bangladeshis who wanted to leave the country had been able to do so. So the Iraqi government said that the deadline for diplomats to leave Kuwait was August 24th, but by then not all the Bangladeshis had left. So my dad tried to use his presence in the country as a bargaining chip. Pretty soon afterwards, we started hearing stories about things from bullying on the streets by Iraqi soldiers to rapes to houses being burned and looted. So there were these rumors and these stories that we were hearing that did make me feel as if, you know, we weren't safe.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14th floor, A141, that would have been our apartment. I think that's the floor, that would have been our balcony. We used to skateboard around here and play football up against the wall and on the little green patch here. This is so weird, it feels so surreal to be back. It's just how I remember it. I think in the first few days of the invasion as well, we used to play down, like out of sight, downstairs in the car park.
This is a lovely swimming pool.
Yeah, this is where I learned to swim. And the diving board, we used to muck around here all the time.
So even during the invasion, you used to come here?
Even during the invasion, yeah. And it was nice having these sort of communal spaces where, you know, people could still get together and meet and, you know, try and discuss and exchange information about what was going on. This is our only sort of means of finding out what was going on in the outside world, really.
But while the signs of fierce resistance are clear, it's no match for the sheer force of the Iraqi offensive.
When the bombing started, we were worried that all the glass would shatter and we wouldn't have adequate shelter. So we prepared a room in the basement. So we put towels there and other things that we'd need. But the problem was that there was still a small window in that room. And at that time, there was a lot of concern that the Iraqis would use chemical or biological weapons. So, I mean, I thought that even if we went into that room, we'd still have a pretty high chance of dying because the gases could seep in through that window.
Meanwhile, the United States was building a coalition of forces as part of an international response. The majority of Kuwait's 2 million population were foreigners. Some in particular were now targets.
I can't remember how close to the invasion it was, but pretty soon I remember that the Iraqi soldiers started rounding up American and British men.
Since the invasion on August the 2nd, some foreigners have escaped from Kuwait, but there are still an estimated 4,000 British citizens there. They've been threatened with trouble if they don't comply with today's instructions. An emergency broadcast to them from the BBC's World Service repeated the Iraqi warning.
The Iraqis have stated that if the British community do not move voluntarily, they will face unspecified difficulties.
Lots of our friends, family friends in the complex were British and American, so I remember quite quickly they had to go into hiding and remain very sort of, they wouldn't go out, and they would make sure all their curtains were drawn and would be very careful about answering the doors. Some of our friends, fathers who would wear Arab clothes to try and blend in or not stick out when they're walking, even walking within the complex at the time.
We dread the knock on the door that may take us away to unknown sights, to long imprisonment and to possible death.
For those under occupation, this uncertainty increased with each day that passed.
There was not really any idea about how long would we be in the situation. Would it be a week? Would it be a month? Would it be a year?
I think there was a summit where there was a possibility that Kuwait might reach a deal with the Iraqi authorities. So the night before that summit, I wrote in my diary that tomorrow there's going to be this summit, and inshallah there'll be a solution that's reached so I can go back to school and everything will be like before again. And then the next day I wrote that the summit has been a failure, so it looks like we'll either have to leave Kuwait. Iraq's definitely staying here. And at the same time, I think Saddam Hussein was reported as saying that he would turn Kuwait into a graveyard. That's when I realized that this would be a much longer problem.
Most of what food there is imported from Iraq. The fisheries, once Kuwait's main source of protein, have been destroyed. Food processing plants in the Sabah industrial area have closed down. The Kuwait Danish dairy has milk, but only enough for 100 people a day.
At first, my mom and I used to go and get supplies from the supermarket. Sometimes there were people, I think they were the Kuwaiti resistance, who'd come by our house and just throw fish wrapped in paper and other supplies just over the gate. So it seemed like there was an effort going on to help people keep their access to food.
And I remember people talking about whether there was enough stocks for people and how long that would last. And you know, people were giving us advice about filling up the baths with water and buckets with water in case the water was going to be cut off. So there's those sorts of like sort of those emergency measures. I do remember going out once or twice. That was with my mum and another family friend who had a car. And I remember, I think we may have once gone to the bank to try and withdraw money, because we thought, okay, if we're going to leave, then we'll try and sort of salvage anything from any accounts and things like that. I remember things being very, very quiet, hardly any traffic on the roads, hardly any people around, and even, I think, in the bank, I remember it just being very, very deserted. I remember seeing sort of piles of rubble and metal and strewn pieces of, I assume, tanks and things around. But it was just more of the most notable thing was just a kind of eeriness of being very empty, because I was used to it being very bustly and lots of traffic all the time and lots, you know, people around and things. So that was probably the most distinct kind of feeling. It was very, very eerily quiet. We had nights where you would hear machine gun fire or explosion type sounds like deep thuds and things, and sometimes we would be sleeping fully clothed just in case we had to sort of make a getaway.
And with the nightmares and all the rumors and all the actual, I mean, it was hard to distinguish between the rumors and the actual stories, but all these things, I mean, none of it seemed like a game, none of it seemed to be exciting or thrilling. I was really, really scared.
We need help. We've been crying for help, and we need help. We need the end of it, even if it's going to end up with war. I mean, we don't care even if we're going to get Kuwait back into ashes. But this is our land, this is our home, we want it. We need help as soon as they can. We really need help.
I don't support war for the sake of war. We've seen enough death and destruction here. We don't want to see any more. But that is why we would support an attack, because we feel that this is the minimum, this is the path which would result in the minimum suffering in the long term.
Information from occupied Kuwait has all but dried up. A few videotapes have been smuggled out, and hostages who have been released have brought their tales of Iraqi terror.
Hey, wall, I got to go. Hey.
Although coalition forces had by now arrived in the Gulf, their initial role was to protect Saudi Arabia from a potential attack. Sweeping sanctions were imposed on Iraq in an apparent attempt to avoid direct military action. As days turned into weeks, for the people in Kuwait, it seemed that nobody was coming to their rescue. Thoughts turned to escape, abandoning their possessions and their former lives.
I mean, you can pretty much see half of Kuwait, pretty much from here, maybe a bit more even. We had a similar view to this. It wasn't quite as high, but I remember we were standing, we had the TV on, and we were standing in the living room at the window just trying to see if we could see anything, and it was just so strange that it seemed all peaceful, normal and serene outside, whereas on the television it's saying, oh, you know, the country's been invaded. My mum got to know that that the British embassy were trying to organise evacuation flights for women and children. My mum also remembers that flight being absolutely silent. She said that no one said a word, and there was no sound until we touched down at the first destination in London, where she said you could sense the feeling of relief. The situation was finally changed, and there was sort of this belief that finally it was all over.
But the escape route for some was overland, and meant having to go through the country of the occupier.
I had mixed feelings about going to Iraq because on the one hand we were escaping, and yet we were sort of escaping into the arms of the enemy. When we got to Baghdad, I was struck by how the Iraqis we saw didn't really seem to be affected by the war. Everyone was going on with life as usual. When we went around the city, nobody asked us where we'd come from or paid much attention to us. To me, the contrast was really striking that in Kuwait, our lives had been turned upside down by this country, and yet in this country, the country that had caused all that turmoil, and well, nothing really had changed.
Back on safe ground, a sense of isolation swept over the children uprooted from their homes.
I think the thing I missed most was friends, really, school friends. It was quite hard because the invasion was right in the middle of summer, so everyone got dispersed and no one had contact with anyone else. I think that was the hardest thing, just sort of thinking, wow, I'm never going to see those friends again. That was the feeling at the time.
I kept thinking about how wonderful life had been before the invasion and how everything was going to change now. Not being able to go back to school, being completely out of touch with my friends.
Yet for those who remained trapped inside Kuwait, it would be months before they saw any sign of hope. Ali was one of those left behind, and with a Kuwaiti mother and Iraqi father, he found himself caught in the middle of the conflict.
Oh my God, so good to see you. Oh, it's just like...
As the international community debated a plan of action against Iraq, Ali witnessed a deterioration.
Some people had generators, but we never got one, so it was just kerosene lamps, candles, flashlights. We had to tape the windows. Low-flying planes would shake the houses and stuff. There was no running water. We had to burn garbage, yeah, because there were no garbage men to pick it up. So you just take the garbage bags, put them out in the sand lot or something, burn them whichever way you can, kerosene, gasoline, Raid. Just light it up. It would cause quite a unpleasant odor at times. I remember seeing, like, rounds fired to the air. Of course, at night it was dark and all the streets were darkened, and they have this really brilliant, like, orange pinkish color to them, so they're easily, visible at night.
But the gunfire was about to become far more intense. On the 29th of November, Saddam was handed an ultimatum by the UN.
If Iraq does not reverse its course peacefully, then other necessary measures, including the use of force, should be authorized.
I remember there was a deadline, January 15th or something, for an airstrike, and we were anticipating it. We were hoping for it.
It was my mother's birthday, actually, the day it started. That's what, January 16th, when the Allied offensive took effect. And that's when it started, yeah.
Ok, je suis au 480, 14 nautiques du point de virage. Altitude.
The world watched as the US-led coalition began bombing Saddam's forces in Iraq and Kuwait.
I remember hearing a lot of explosions. Our front door was the actual house was all glass, taped up, but that was still shake. Once the offensive took place, and between that time and the liberation, everything happened, like, really quick.
On the 26th of February 1991, Iraqi forces retreated along the same road they had used to invade Kuwait 7 months earlier. As quickly as it had been taken, Kuwait was freed.
We go now to our country to freedom, okay? Yeah! Yeah! We got it!
I remember waking up, my mother was ecstatic almost. I've seen her really happy, but that was like one of her most happiest moments I've seen her, She was like really happy about it. It was actually a very nice morning. It was slightly overcast. It was nice, and she went on the streets and I went after her. All the neighborhood kids basically running around, and they were, my mother stopped one of them. She's like, for reassurance, are they gone? She's like, yeah, they're all gone. I saw them. They took their tanks and they're leaving.
I can't describe the happiness after the liberation. And it's just pure, 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 pure happiness. Your country is back. Your life's back. Even as a child, you can sense the insecurity, and we were lost.
Most of the year had gone. I actually thought that by that time we could actually just go back to school, finish our few months, and start a new year. So I was pretty happy about it.
But after 7 months of occupation, normal life couldn't be restored so easily. Ali and I went to visit a house, said to be the scene of one of the final raids by Iraqi soldiers, in which a dozen Kuwaiti resistance fighters were killed, just days before the Allied offensive began. It has been left in the same state ever since, a silent testament to a short but brutal occupation.
During the invasion itself, I wasn't really aware of what was happening outside. I mean, my parents made sure we didn't hear about it, all the torture, the killings, the executions. No, I wasn't aware of any of that. And it was only until, it wasn't until after the war, there was these books with pictures of the soldiers, Iraqi soldiers, torture rooms, and actually pictures of bodies, and that made me realize what had happened over the past few months weren't just, us living like it was, camp and whatnot. Yeah, it was really disturbing at that time. The fact that the Iraqi army did what they did really really disturbed me, because I know my mother was Kuwaiti. I know I had, family in Kuwait.
Ali may have survived the war, but it wasn't all over for him and his family.
Again, I mean, shortly after the liberation, the Kuwaiti resistance came one night and took my father in for questioning, because, he was legally a citizen of Iraq. But, he was disturbed by the whole thing, to say the least. And I think he had made the decision to leave before that. He just felt that he couldn't live here anymore after what his government came and did here. When I heard that I had to leave Kuwait, I was really disappointed and frustrated because I couldn't do anything about it. And I wasn't actually told, I just overheard my parents talking about it. So I was actually hoping that for some reason we wouldn't go and I'd go back to school, but that didn't happen.
For those who did return, it was a bittersweet moment.
First day back of school, I was very nervous. It's been almost a year since I've last seen my friends. So I went in looking for my friends. Most of them weren't there. It wasn't like going back to the school you knew. It was like going to a new school, having to make new friends, having to start over.
None of us suspected that it would be 20 years before we would see each other again.
Welcome in Kuwait. Welcome, Mr. Bush. Welcome.
The joy of liberation was accompanied by a period of chaos and lawlessness. Many Kuwaitis kept hold of the weapons they had acquired during the conflict. Some assumed authority, punishing and banishing those they accused of betrayal. Locals took on jobs that many expatriates had been forced to abandon. While people started to count the dead and search for the missing, the aftershocks of the war were still being felt. The defeated Iraqi regime had dumped millions of barrels of oil into the Gulf and destroyed more than 700 oil wells, creating a massive environmental disaster. Kuwait's oil, which had sparked the 1990 invasion, now blazed in the wake of war. Days merged into night as darkness clouded the country. Black rain fell over Kuwait. It would take more than 8 months to put out the flames, and many more to recover from the financial blow. The whole experience forced Kuwaitis to reevaluate their alliances.
We used to be more simple people. We trusted everyone. After the invasion, it was like, no, let's think again, are you really my friend? Public schools in Kuwait mainly concentrated on Arabic, and after the invasion, Kuwaitis had a vision to educate their kids better in English, because we never know what would happen. You know, we have a neighbor we can't trust, and we can't change that neighbor, obviously.
How are you? I'm good, alhamdulillah. How are you?
I arranged to meet Fahad, another Kuwaiti and former classmate of mine. He had had perhaps the luckiest escape of all, getting out of Kuwait just hours before the airport was shut down following the invasion. It would be several years before he and his family returned home.
The invasion and causing people to spend part of their lives abroad, I'm sure, despite the circumstance, it was a good opportunity for them to maybe gain knowledge, experience, qualities that they may have otherwise wouldn't have acquired. The best 6 years of my life began in college, and it changed me quite a bit. My friends had to teach me a few things when I came back, refresh my memory when I came back in 2005. How many times to kiss on the cheek, when to kiss on the cheek, is it 1, 2, or is it 1, 2, 3? Sometimes it's a combo, so it was confusing. I know for a fact that this is not where I'm going to end up in Kuwait. I do have plans to move out, but only because I've been around and I've seen what there is out there.
Hello!
Nada, like me, was lucky enough to have been out of Kuwait on summer holiday when Iraq invaded. But her family lost everything they had left behind.
We actually managed to keep a lot of photos. So this is like a treasure for me. And you know, I took these with me to Egypt, so that's why I actually have them.
On holiday?
Yeah, that last year when we were together in 1990, I took these 2 albums with me, so that's why they're like all battered and everything. I find that they're really important. You don't have anything?
I have nothing. I don't even have a print of like our school photos.
I found it really difficult to go from being on holiday one day to being told that I would have to stay here and then go to school. I was so upset that I wasn't going back, so upset. I didn't really want to live in England. I so wanted to go back. Do you know, you think about it, it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, people weren't as open about like foreign people coming into, like where I went to school, the junior school, there was only one other black girl, and that was it for foreigners. And it was quite a small community school.
Cool, Maka, you're not actually being heard.
I think I stood out because it was my name.
You don't remember?
My name, my accent. I hated my name growing up because it was so obvious that I was different. And then I got married and had to change it, and I almost begrudged it because I suddenly got so attached to it. From Nada Irani to Nada McCormack, which is just the most Western you could get.
It was as though Nada was still caught between two worlds. Although she now lived in the West, she still felt a strong connection to her roots. Rocky, on the other hand, whose family had also ended up in the UK, seemed to have resettled more easily.
To me, until I was 10, Kuwait was that was the the 4 walls. That was it. I couldn't really imagine living anywhere else. Since moving here from Kuwait, I've always lived here. So I went through high school here and university, and most of my friends are around here now. So I'm currently working for London Underground, and I really love the city, so it's a really nice opportunity to sort of feel that I'm making a difference in the city. Around that age, when you're 10 years old and coming up to your teenage years, things change dramatically anyway. Just for me, it was a slightly greater change, moving countries and through the circumstance. But I guess that's why sometimes I find it quite hard to relate that those years of my life to now. It all feels like a bit of a story, and that feels like it was someone else.
For Sarah, the traumatic experience of invasion and war proved a profound influence on her career path.
I'm working on my PhD in political science. I graduated from Mount Holyoke, which is in Massachusetts, in 2002. And then I started the PhD program in 2005. What I lived through in Kuwait definitely had an influence on my interest in politics and international politics. But afterwards, when I was in Paris and I heard about all the Iraqi casualties and all the all the negative effects that the counterattack had had on Iraq, that made me rethink the way in which we should seek help or ask for help, and it made me think about the interests of the members of the coalition that had invaded. It made me think about whether it would have been possible to find a solution to liberate Kuwait without having caused all the casualties among Iraqi civilians.
After Kuwait's liberation, Ali and his family moved to Egypt. Both his parents passed away, and he was eventually sent back to Kuwait to live with his aunt. He was now preparing for his university exams, graduating almost a decade later than the rest of our class.
After the war, the invasion and the war, my academic life took like a dip because of all the, I'm not sure what it was it paperwork or problems with visas and whatnot, but we couldn't get into a school in Egypt for a while. So there was like a 3-year gap actually. 1990, 93, that's when I started high school. And then I had to come back here. And there was another 3-year gap again. And then I had to redo high school. I did home studying. Then entered Kuwait University. Coming back to Kuwait was really different for me. I mean, the whole place had changed. A lot of things stayed the same, places. But just the feel of it was kind of surreal actually coming back.
Remember me from the airplane? No, I don't. No. I heard that you were on it. Hi, how are you doing? That's all right. I remember your face. Hi. Do you recognize me? Of course I do.
Okay, how are you, man?
How are you doing?
Right.
Ali, you have not changed. Your face is the same.
Harry.
How's it going, dude? Good to see you.
Good to see you. How are you?
Such a long time.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God, no, I can't believe it. Me too. How are you? How are you?
The first Michael Jackson tape I ever borrowed from anyone else. I followed you out over there and I begged you, please.
Really?
It's a thriller.
I can't believe it. Oh my God. I got it easy these days.
Yeah, they're spoiled.
I remember we used to just be here, like our shoes burning. Like
Yeah, in the sun. What do you do in London?
I'm an art director. I work in marketing.
Fantastic.
For my
That's
city.
great. Are you in touch with Rocky? Do you guys see each other?
No, I didn't even Rocky.
You didn't know he was there?
I was flight as Rocky and I didn't even recognise it.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
So who do you keep in touch with? Do you know Ali? Kimmy's staring at the cake. I just can't believe how different you look, and that's definitely how I remember you. Do you remember the papyrus yearbook? Yes. Now I remember it. You remember it now? Oh no! You told Ali I wish you weren't here.
Oh my God, I remember this now.
Okay, that's you. No. And Nada, there's Nada on the left. Okay, so Ali and Fahad, can you just swap places, please? Actually reenacting the real photo. When I first started to organize this reunion, I wanted to bring everyone together again in the place where we used to play. But actually, now that it's all over, I realized that I just wanted to relive those moments for myself. I just wanted to see, to catch a glimpse of how we all were together back in those days.
I'd achieved what I'd set out to do, but along the way, I'd also discovered that the invasion had more of an impact on us than I'd ever realized. For the Kuwaiti government, the past is also not forgotten. For 2 decades, it has refused to absolve Iraq of more than $20 billion in remaining war reparations, despite the downfall and death of Saddam Hussein. And Kuwait's National Day celebrations, that we used to look forward to, today provoke more chilling recollections. The extended public holiday now also commemorates the anniversary of the end of the Gulf War, stamping the conflict into the national psyche.
Kuwaitis will never forget this war. We'll never forget the invasion and the impact it has left on our lives. I mean, of course we have to move on, but for us to completely forget, never. I'll never forget. I'll make sure my kids will never forget.
The summer of 1990 is etched into our childhood memories. Although a chapter of our past has been closed, it can never be erased.
Living through the occupation definitely changed the way I saw myself. I felt as if I had to take responsibility for my family, for all of our security. So I did feel as if I stopped being a child with this rude awakening that, you know, the world isn't a perfectly secure place.
Things happen for reasons that are beyond you, at least as a child. You don't understand why something like this would happen because of, you know, the invasion and the war and what happened to us being uprooted and all that, and being held back in my education for years. I guess I realized that, you know, nothing's really stable, and when it comes to friendship, make the most of what you have when you have it, because nothing really lasts. Nothing would ever last for long.